Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, what could be the reason why these guys are doing this? And this is the NATO member states will start producing Soviet, Russian era ammunition for the Ukrainians. So they will not transfer, or they don't do a good enough job transferring their own weapons to Ukraine, the Americans, the Germans, the French, all these guys. So then they decide now to actually start the production of ammunition for the equipment, the military, the weapons the Ukrainians have right now in order to be able to fight the Russians. So that's very interesting. Is it cheaper to do it, or what's going on here? Let's see, maybe this article will explain. So this article comes from the New Voice of Ukraine from November 30th, 2022. NATO looking at production of Soviet-era weapons used by Ukraine, Blinken says. By the way, Blinken is a kosher guy, as Zelensky is Mihail Reznikov and what's his name, Yermak. What a coincidence. And I just found out today that's another guy on Great Britain who, not Surmak, not Maharishi, someone else who is another kosher. And he's very proud of it, and why shouldn't he? We're looking at every option to make sure that, again, the Ukrainians get what they need and what can be most effective for them, Blinken says. Some of that does go to Soviet-era systems that they had in their inventory for decades and, for example, making sure that the ammunition is there for these systems, Blinken added. And I'm quoting again, and in some cases that might require producing things that have been produced for some time. U.S. newspaper, the New York Times, earlier reported that small NATO member states have exhausted their potential to supply arms to Ukraine. According to the publication, NATO countries are discussing investments in old factories in the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Bulgaria to resume production of Soviet-era shells for Ukraine's Soviet-era artillery arsenal. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg previously called on the alliance to increase production of weapons to support Ukraine, as NATO has exhausted most of its stockpiles of weapons and ammunition. Did you hear this? This comes from the Ukrainians, stating that NATO said, the chief Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, NATO has exhausted most of its stockpiles of weapons and ammunition. How about the Russians? How about the Russians? What did they do? Did they run out of them? I don't think so. They say they ran out of their ammunitions and their rockets and missiles, about 5 months ago, but they're still hitting the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, the war goes on, but what can you do? It's either or, it seems like. So, they said that the NATO runs out of the stockpile. That means they will not send any more weapons to Ukraine, or not at the volume they sent so far. Personally, I don't think they sent enough to counter the Russians. Not because I root for them, send enough more. No, but I don't think the numbers, they sent 20 HIMARS or something. What is that? They sent Caesar or whatever. They sent this and that. I don't think that's a big number whatsoever. They sent 2 of this, 5 of this, 10 of this. They're going to send 80 tanks made out of Soviet tanks. I think it's T-72 or something it was, from Slovenia. They want airplanes now, the Ukrainians, and they will get airplanes. They want, and they will be delivered anyway, long-range missile systems. They will be delivered that. So as you see, it seems like the NATO countries, these guys that fight against Russia, they exhausted whatever they started with, but then now they got the second echelon, more advanced, which is longer range, airplanes, tanks. So they start, using those, and once they use those and they, reach their quota, because they're gonna send 1,000 airplanes to Ukraine. I don't think so. So then they will, exhaust this way. You're gonna go to the next one, and in the meantime, they have time to replenish whatever they started with. Could be. And in the meantime, they try to support Ukraine with the Soviet era one. I mean, Soviet era. This is another bullshit. These guys, which is the military here, and these so-called free mass media in the United States and in a free world, let's put it this way. Let's be weasel for a little bit. Weasels. They say, well, Soviet military equipment was garbage. Well, I don't know if it was really garbage. If you try to give these guys, it seems like garbage against garbage. Is that what you're telling me? Is Soviet weapons against Soviet weapons, and once 3 HIMARS showed up over there, they fuck up all the Russians? I don't believe that a bit. I think the Ukrainians had a lot of weapons before the war started. A lot, not a lot because the Ukrainians had it. No, I think the army was beefed up by the United States and NATO countries, and I have a lot of sources to back me up on that. And I just was another article yesterday that confirmed that, and another article 3 days ago that I made a video with Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, who said that they went and they signed those Minsk agreements, 2 of them, just to buy time to be armed by the United States and its weasels for 8 years. And then they said something about being provided, I don't know how many $1 billion worth of weapons since 2014, 2015 until now. So when the Russians were saying that, hey, wait a second, we need security guarantees because these guys are getting armed by you guys, and we need to stay one in front of another, facing one another, and have a signed document, which again will mean shit. Remember when Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, came with that little piece of paper at the airport, was a peace in our time, yay! And everybody was like, and laugh. Hitler was laughing his ass off back in the, I don't know, Hof. I can't remember the first name. In Bavarian Alps, Bergenhof. These guys blew up, fucking idiots. Anyway. So he was laughing his ass. Oh, look at this Chamberlain. He's peace in our time with dignity or whatever it was. Anyway, the same these guys, the Russians, after, if the Americans would say, yeah, let's sign this document. Yeah, here it is. Where else do you want me to sign? Over there? Okay. Where else? Over here? Okay, all right, now beat it. And then do whatever I've been doing and fuck off. What do you think the Russians will say? Again, let's talk. Hey, what's going on? You break the contract, you broke the understanding, you broke this and that. Yeah. And then it would drag their feet for about 2 more years or 3 more years until the Russians would say, fuck, these guys are just pulling our legs, so let's do something about it, like they eventually did. So we would have saved Americans 2 more to 3 more years to pump weapons in Ukraine. They didn't even how should I put it, honor the contracts that they had with South Korea. They didn't deliver the South Koreans like $12 billion worth of weapons. There it's backlogged for about $12 billion, and all that supposedly was transferred to Ukraine instead of going to South Korea. Oh man, thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.